The letter had worn edges from folding and unfolding. I'd read it so many times the creases threatened to tear clean through. Separating widow-seeking honest arrangement from ranch work in exchange for security. I'd underlined those words myself 3 weeks ago, sitting at my sister's dining table while her family's laughter drifted from the parlor like a language I'd forgotten how to speak. The advertisement had seemed fair, practical. A widower needed help managing what his wife used to handle. I needed purpose and a place that was mine. No false promises of affection, just honest need on both sides. I'd told myself this was sensible, not desperate. But late at night, folding laundry that wasn't mine in a house where I was permanent guest, I'd let myself imagine something more. A partner, maybe even. Someday, affection growing slow and careful, like prairie grass after rain. I was a fool for hope. But what else did I have left? My husband Thomas used to say I had a spine of iron. Clara, he'd tell me, pride warming his voice, you could face down a stampede without flinching. But he'd never seen me after he died. Never saw how I'd bent under the weight of his absence. How I'd nearly broken, trying to hold myself together while the world kept turning. Like his death was nothing remarkable. Just another fever, another widow, another woman learning to be invisible. This journey west was my attempt to stand straight again. The train had taken 3 days. I'd watched green give way to brown, watched trees thin to scrub, watched the landscape open into something vast and unforgiving. Each mile felt like a prayer I didn't quite believe, like counting rosary beads with uncertain faith. I'd packed light. 1 trunk holding my married life, 4 dresses, 3 aprons, my good Sunday hat, books Thomas had given me, his pocket watch I couldn't bear to sell. Everything I owned fit in a space 3 feet long. It should have felt like freedom. Instead, it felt like proof of how small I'd become. The money saved for passage had taken a year. Every penny I could spare from my sister's household allowance payment for my help that felt more like charity with each passing month. I'd saved $37. Passage west had cost $18. That left me $19 and some change to start over. To bet everything on a stranger's promise of honest work. When the conductor called my stop, my hands shook fastening my travel cloak. I touched Thomas's watch in my reticle, felt its steady tick-tick-tick against my palm. It used to comfort me, that reliable rhythm. Now it felt like a countdown. Time was either running toward something new or running out entirely. The depot platform was smaller than I'd imagined. Dustier, hotter. I smoothed my traveling dress, my best one. Carefully pressed that morning and checked my reflection in the train window. 33 years old, but the journey had added more. The western sun showed every line around my eyes, every strand of hair trying to escape my careful pins. I stepped down with my trunk, chin high, spine straight. Other passengers flowed around me like water around a stone. They had people waiting, places to go, certainty about what came next. I had an advertisement from a stranger and hope wearing thin. The platform boards were weathered gray, gaps between them showing dirt below. I counted the planks while I waited, counted the nails, counted anything to keep from counting the ways this could go wrong. A few travelers glanced my way, then away. The station master studied his ledger with intense focus. I was scanning faces for someone matching the description tall. Weathered, 42, when I saw him. 3 men fit that description. I waited for one to claim me like I was luggage awaiting pickup. hated the transaction of it, needed it anyway. Thomas's watch ticked in my reticule. I'd survived his death by taking each moment as it came. One breath, one heartbeat, one step forward. I could do this. I would do this. I touched the watch one more time. Time to see, I whispered. If rejection redirected me somewhere worth going, or if I've just traded one kind of loneliness for another. One of the men stepped forward. Our eyes met across the platform, and for a heartbeat, I saw something that might have been recognition. Then his gaze traveled down my frame and back up to my face, and his expression shuddered like a door slamming shut. You said you were younger. His voice carried across the platform, loud enough that heads turned. I opened my mouth to protest. I'd been honest in my letter widowed at 31. Now 33. I'd never claimed to be a girl, but my voice wouldn't work. The words stuck in my throat like stones. I need someone. He paused, reconsidering whatever he'd been about to say. Someone different. This won't work. He actually turned his back and walked away, just like that. As if I were merchandise he'd ordered from a catalog and found unsatisfactory upon delivery. The platform seemed to tilt beneath my feet. The station master's focus on his ledger intensified to the point of absurdity. Other travelers suddenly discovered urgent business with their luggage. Everyone was pretending not to notice while absolutely noticing I was a spectacle of failure, displayed for public consumption. There's a particular kind of shame in being appraised and found wanting. Worse than loss, worse even than grief. The shame of insufficiency. I'd somehow failed at being merchandise. I sat on my trunk, not collapsing, sitting, deliberate, controlled, spine straight, hands folded in my lap, face composed into a mask I'd learned to wear after Thomas died. The mask that said, I'm fine, even when fine was a lie I told myself to survive. Inside, I was calculating. Money left $4.27. Return ticket cost too much. Local boarding houses unknown and probably beyond my means. Wiring my sister for help impossible. I'd rather sleep in the street than admit this failure. Then hear the I told you, so hiding behind her concerned sympathy. The sun moved across the sky. My throat grew dry. My shoulders ached from holding them back. But I wouldn't slump. Wouldn't let them see me break. Crying was private, and I'd lost enough dignity publicly today. I watched ants trailing along the platform boards, following some scent or signal invisible to me. At least they knew where they were going. At least they had purpose. Hours passed, maybe 3, maybe more. Time stretched strange when you're sitting on your entire life packed into a trunk. Planning survival with pocket change, the platform emptied. The station master finally looked up, pity in his eyes, which was somehow worse than the earlier avoidance. I'd survived my husband's death, survived the year after when breathing felt like work, survived becoming invisible in my sister's house, but sitting on that trunk, watching the man who was supposed to want me disappear around the corner of the depot building. I wondered if you could survive yourself disappearing. If that was already happening, if I was already gone and just didn't know it yet. The sun was lowering when I noticed him. Different man. Older than the first, more weathered. Lines around his eyes from squinting at horizon. Not from cruelty. You learn to read the difference. He stood a few paces away, studying my trunk with an expression I couldn't name. Not pity. Something else. something that looked almost like recognition. Finally, he spoke. "Ma'am, why is there a perfectly good trunk sitting here, unattended?" I looked up at eyes the color of creek, stones gray-blue and steady. Found my voice, rusty from disuse, because I wasn't what was ordered. His jaw tightened. Not with disgust at me, I realized, but with anger at the situation. At the man who'd left me here. At whatever circumstance led to a woman sitting alone on a depot platform as the day died around her. He didn't ask questions, didn't offer sympathy, just bent and lifted my trunk like it weighed nothing. Turned toward the station master's office, his back communicating decisions already made. I stood because my legs remembered how. Even if my mind hadn't caught up yet, he set my trunk by the station master's door and said, clear and certain. My wife's train was delayed. Appreciate you keeping watch? The lie was delivered with such authority that the station master just nodded, relief evident on his face. One less problem to solve, one less abandoned woman to worry about. Then the man turned to me. Come on, then. Not asking, directing. I should have bristled. Should have demanded explanations. But I was too exhausted for pride, too shocked for resistance. I stood and followed, because what else could I do? Where else could I go? He helped me up into the wagon proper hand on my elbow. No lingering, no presumption beyond assistance. Then he climbed up himself, clicked to the horses, and we rolled away from the depot. Away from my public shame, toward an uncertain future that couldn't possibly be worse than the certain present I was leaving behind. The silence stretched between us like a physical thing. I studied him sideways, taking inventory the way I'd learned to assess situations since Thomas died. Worn boots. Risoled at least twice. Work-roughened hands that knew their business with reins. A wedding ring on his left hand, worn thin from years of wear. Gold, catching the late afternoon light. A widower. Then, like recognized, like we were both haunted. Why did you do that? I finally managed. My voice came out steadier than I felt. He didn't look at me, kept his eyes on the road ahead. Man who'd leave a woman stranded at a depot isn't a man. Figured you needed help? I can provide it. I don't need charity. The words came out sharper than I'd intended. Edged with pride I couldn't afford, but couldn't abandon either. Now he did look. Met my eyes directly. Wasn't offering charity, was offering work. You can cook, yes? Amend. Manage a household. Tend a garden. All of it. I'd run my own home for 5 years of marriage. Managed everything after Thomas died. Keeping our little house together, even as I fell apart inside it. He nodded once. Satisfied. Then it's a fair trade. I need help with what my wife used to manage. You need shelter and wages, nothing charitable about it. His wife, past tense, the thin gold ring on his finger told a story of loss, same as the one I carried. We were both wearing our grief like jewelry, unable to take it off even when we wanted to. The ranch appeared gradually first as a shape on the horizon. Then, as details emerging, a modest house, weathered but solid, windows clean but curtainless, porch swept but empty of decoration, A barn, corrals, a few outbuildings, everything functional, nothing decorative. A man's house, I thought. A lonely man's house that used to hold a woman's touch. Something in my chest loosened slightly. We might speak the same language after all, the language of survival. Of doing what needs doing, even when your heart's not in it. He pulled the wagon up to the house and climbed down. Reached for my trunk, carried it inside without asking where I wanted it. I followed, taking in the kitchen with its cast-iron stove, sturdy table, single chair, one plate on the counter, one coffee cup in the sink, one of everything. The arithmetic of loneliness. He set my trunk in a small room off the kitchen. "This is yours," he said. Door locks. From inside. Then he was gone, boots heavy on the wooden floor, leaving me alone with the clearest message possible. You're safe here. But you're separate. Protected, but not possessed. I tested the lock. In, out, in again. The mechanism was well-oiled, reliable. I could control access. Could keep him out if I chose. Could choose when or if to open the door. I sat on the narrow bed, trunk at my feet, and let myself feel the weight of the day. The rejection, the rescue, the strange transaction I'd just entered into. This man had claimed me as his wife to give me protection. But what did he get in return? Labor. Yes, but I suspected there was more to it. Suspected we were both trying to outrun ghosts. And maybe shared haunting was easier than solitary grief. Thomas's watch ticked in my reticule. I pulled it out, held it to my ear. Steady, reliable, indifferent to my crisis. His time had stopped. But mine kept going, whether I wanted it to or not. "Well, Thomas," I whispered to the memory of him. "I don't know if this is rescue or just another kind of trap. But at least I get to choose when the door opens." The lock clicked under my fingers one more time. Testing. Confirming. Yes, I could keep him out. But the real question, the one I wasn't ready to answer yet, was whether I'd eventually want to let him in. The first week passed in careful choreography. I learned his patterns the way you learn weather, by paying attention to small signs. Reading the shifts before they happened. He rose before dawn. So did I old habits from farm life. From years of marriage when breakfast needed making and livestock needed tending. I'd find him already dressed, already moving toward the door, pausing only long enough to nod acknowledgement of my presence before disappearing into the pre-dawn darkness. The coffee pot was always on the stove when I entered the kitchen that first morning. I'd stared at it, uncertain if he'd left it for me or simply forgotten to put it away. The next morning, same thing. The third morning, I timed it carefully. Rose early enough to see him pour 2 cups, drink half of his while I dressed. Then position the second exactly where my hand would reach first. He'd noticed my patterns, anticipated my needs, without comment, without expectation of gratitude or acknowledgement. I didn't know what to do with kindness that asked for nothing in return. I started noticing other things, too. His work shirts were mended, but badly stitches too large, thread the wrong color, patches pulling at the edges. The garden was functional, but joyless, rows too straight, nothing planted for beauty, only for use. The kitchen was orderly but sparse, minimum dishes, one of everything. A house that functioned without living. Thomas used to bring me wildflowers, big gestures, declarations of affection that bloomed bright and faded fast. This man brought me coffee at the temperature I preferred and thought I wouldn't notice. I'd have married Thomas for the flowers, but I'd have stayed for the coffee. I began my own small returns. Mended his shirts properly, small stitches, matching thread, reinforced seams. Made biscuits the way I noticed he ate 3 of them, savoring each bite like they were precious. Left water and clean bandages by the barn door after I saw him wrap a torn palm with a dirty rag. We were talking. I realized, not with words, with small kindnesses that said, "I see you. I consider you worth effort." Neither of us acknowledged this language we were developing, but it was there in every carefully poured cup, every neatly mended shirt, every gesture that required paying attention to another person's needs. Days passed, then weeks. I stopped jumping when he entered rooms. He stopped treating me like I might shatter if he spoke too loud or moved too quick. The silence between us changed quality from careful to companionable. Sometimes I caught him watching me work in the garden, expression unreadable. Sometimes he caught me watching him gentle a nervous horse, hands patient and sure. We both looked away, but slower each time, like we were testing something, seeing how long we could hold the connection before it became too much. One evening, I made stew the way my mother taught me, long simmered, rich with herbs from the garden that was slowly becoming less sterile under my attention. He came in from evening chores, stopped in the doorway, and just breathed in the smell. "Smells like home," he said quietly, then seemed startled by his own words. Cleared his throat, took his seat at the table without elaborating. But I understood. Home wasn't a place. It was sensory memory, the smell of cooking, the sound of another person moving through rooms, the knowledge that someone would be there when you returned. We were both rebuilding home in small increments, testing whether it was possible to construct something new from the rubble of what we'd lost. I wondered when I'd started counting his footsteps on the porch, when his absence had begun to feel like a room with missing furniture, functionally complete, but noticeably empty. When had I begun listening for his return? Safety was supposed to be enough, shelter and purpose. A fair trade, as he'd said. But humans are greedy creatures. We taste contentment and start hungering for connection. I was getting greedy, and it terrified me. One evening, maybe 3 weeks into our arrangement, he came to the kitchen doorway while I was washing dishes, cleared his throat. I turned, hands dripping soap suds, waiting. "Good biscuits today," he said. 3 words. Simple. Direct. They landed in my chest like stones in still water, rippling outward in ways I couldn't control and didn't want to examine too closely. "Thank you," I managed without my voice shaking. He nodded and left. I stood there with wet hands, staring at the empty doorway, pressing my other palm flat against the counter where he'd set his empty plate. The wood was smooth under my fingers, worn by years of use, of other hands, of his wife who'd stood here before me. This is how it starts. I thought, small words, smaller gestures, seeds of something dangerous called caring. I should pull them up now, before they take root, before they grow into something I can't control. But I didn't. I left them alone. Watered them with more coffee, more biscuits, more small kindnesses that said you matter to me even though I'm not ready to say it aloud. And every day, those seeds grew a little deeper. Spring storms in Wyoming came violent and sudden. One moment the sky was clear, the next it was bruised purple, air turning copper with that electric taste that meant trouble. I was in the garden, pulling weeds, when the first thunder rolled across the prairie like God clearing his throat. I should have headed inside. My feet wouldn't move. Thunder again. Closer. The air pressure changed, pressing against my skin, and suddenly I wasn't in Wyoming anymore. I was in that cemetery 2 years ago, mud everywhere. Thomas's coffin being lowered, while thunder mocked the preacher's words about peace and rest, and God's mysterious ways. My hands were shaking, not from cold, from memory. From every loss I'd survived, revisiting at once, like they'd just been waiting for the right trigger. I made it to the kitchen before my legs gave out. Not a graceful sinking, a collapse. My skirts were soaked, water pooling around my boots. I wrapped my arms around myself, trying to hold everything in. But it was like trying to hold water in cupped hands. It just kept leaking through. The thunder sounded like artillery, like the world breaking, like everything ending again. I heard footsteps on the porch, the door opening. His voice, concerned Clara. He'd never used my name before. Always ma'am if he addressed me directly at all. Hearing my name in his voice cracked something open inside me that I'd been keeping carefully sealed. I couldn't look up, couldn't speak. I was folded over myself like paper crumpling, trying to make myself smaller, trying to disappear into the pain, because at least pain was familiar, and this was exposure, vulnerability, all the things I'd sworn never to show again. He didn't ask what was wrong, didn't touch me, just moved through the kitchen with quiet efficiency, bringing blankets, building up the fire, making tea. Then he pulled out the chair across from me and sat, waiting. The thunder cracked overhead, and I flinched like it was a physical blow. My husband died on a day like this. The words came out broken, jagged, thunder and mud, and I couldn't stop thinking about him being cold in the ground. It's been 2 years, and I still can't. My voice broke completely. Once I started talking, I couldn't stop. It all came spilling out the fever that took Thomas, the funeral in the rain, the first year of grief that felt like drowning, the second year when I realized I'd survived but didn't know who I was without him, the loneliness that followed me like a shadow, becoming invisible in my sister's house, answering his advertisement because work felt safer than grief, because purpose felt like maybe I could matter again. He listened without interrupting, didn't offer platitudes or false comfort, just listened with his whole attention, like my story mattered, like I mattered. When I finally ran out of words, he was quiet for so long I thought I'd said too much, revealed too much, made myself unbearable. Then he spoke, voice steady but low. Sarah died screaming. The midwife couldn't stop the bleeding. I held our daughter for 20 minutes before she died too. Buried them together the next day in ground so frozen we had to break it with pickaxes. His hands weren't steady anymore. They trembled slightly against the table, and I saw they were scarred old wounds, poorly healed. Women crying, he continued. It freezes me cold every time, brings it all back, her screaming, the baby's silence. The way the midwife just kept saying, I'm sorry, like words could stop the bleeding. We sat with that, with shared understanding of grief's permanent presence, with the knowledge that some sounds, some sights, some moments would always have the power to transport us back to the worst day of our lives. He reached across the table, not quite touching my hand. close enough that I could feel the warmth of his palm hovering near mine. Close enough to be connection without being demand. "You're not invisible here," he said quietly. "I see you. Saw you at that depot, sitting on your trunk, refusing to break. See you every day, making this house feel less empty. You're not invisible, Clara." My hand moved toward his, stopped inches away. "I'm not ready." I whispered, "I know." His voice was gentle, understanding. "Me neither. But maybe someday we will be, if you wanted." The storm passed while we sat there, the thunder rolling away to trouble someone else. But something had shifted between us. Tectonic and irreversible. I'd let him see behind my walls. Worse, I'd seen behind his. And now I knew he wasn't just the stranger who'd claimed me at the depot. He was someone I could actually care about. Someone I was already caring about. If I was honest with myself, and caring meant risking loss all over again. There's a particular intimacy to shared grief. Not the intimacy of bodies, but of souls. The recognition that says, "I know what living through impossible looks like." It's more dangerous than any kiss. Because once you've seen someone's deepest wound, and they've seen yours, you can't unknow each other. Can't go back to being strangers sharing space. After he left me to rest, I lay in my small room, listening to the house settle around me. The storm had washed everything clean, but I felt dirtier somehow, exposed, like I'd been hiding and now couldn't anymore. I'd been guarding against falling. Didn't realize I'd already fallen, just been falling so slowly, I'd mistaken it for standing still. The storm didn't push me. It just made me aware I'd already left solid ground. And the terrifying part, I didn't know if I wanted to climb back up or if I wanted to see where falling led. 3 months into our arrangement, I was kneading bread when hoofbeats approached, fast too fast for casual. I looked out to see his foreman riding hard, expression urgent. "Ma'am." He pulled up sharp. "Boss took a bad fall chasing strays in the canyon. Knocked clean unconscious. We got him in the wagon, but I didn't let him finish." My hands were flour white, shaking, but my voice came out steady. "Where is he?" "Just outside." I ran. Actually ran, flour dusting my skirts, heart hammering against my ribs. The wagon bed held him, blood matting his dark hair, face pale against the wood, unconscious. Utterly still except for the shallow rise and fall of his chest. The old me surfaced. The woman who'd nursed Thomas through fever. Who'd managed crisis after crisis because falling apart was a luxury we couldn't afford. My hands knew what to do, even when my mind was screaming. I checked his pupils, uneven but reactive. Palpated his skull carefully, feeling for fracture, for the telltale give that meant bone had broken. Found a goose egg rising, but nothing worse. Checked his breathing, his pulse. Cataloged injuries with clinical detachment that felt like armor against panic. "Get the doctor," I told the foreman. 12 miles north. Ride hard. "Ma'am, should I stay? Help you get him now." The word came out sharp as a whip crack. "I'll manage." He went. I got the hands to help me move him inside. Onto his bed the first time I'd entered his bedroom. It was sparse like the rest of the house. One photograph on the dresser, him younger. A pretty woman beside him. Both smiling. Sarah. His first wife. His lost love. I turned away from the photo and focused on him. Cleaned the wound with steady hands. Applied pressure, monitored for signs of brain swelling, vomiting, seizures, fixed pupils. The things that would mean he was dying. "Don't you dare," I whispered, pressing clean cloth to his head. "Don't you dare leave me here." The words came out before I could stop them. Leave me, not leave me. Like he belonged to me. Like I had the right to demand he stay. He surfaced briefly, eyes confused and unfocused. "Clara, I'm here. You fell. Doctor's coming. Sorry. Trouble. Stop." I gentled my voice with effort. "You claimed me as wife at that depot. Remember, wife means staying through hard times." His lips curved in something almost like a smile. "Thought you said names don't make marriage." My throat closed. I couldn't breathe around the truth, rising up. Maybe I'm building one anyway. He tried to say something else, but consciousness left him again. His head lolled to the side, and I eased him back, checking his airway, his breathing, his pulse. Everything steady, everything holding. I sat beside his bed through the longest night of my life. Watched his chest rise and fall, rise and fall. Counted each breath like prayer. My hand found his, fingers pressing against his wrist to feel his pulse. Steady, steady skip. Steady, steady skip. Somewhere between silent breakfasts and shared grief, between mended shirts and understood thunderstorms. I'd stopped just surviving and started living again. Started caring. The very thing I'd sworn never to risk. The thing that could destroy me all over again. "You saw me when I was invisible," I whispered to his unconscious form. "I won't let you disappear on me now. You don't get to claim me and then leave. That's not fair. None of this is fair, but you don't get to leave." I was bargaining. With God. With fate. With anything that might be listening. Not again, I thought. Please, not again. I can't bury another person. I couldn't finish the thought. Couldn't name what was growing in my chest. Taking up space. Demanding acknowledgement. Because once I named it, it became real. And real things could be lost. Dawn brought the doctor. He examined while I hovered. Useless now that professional help had arrived. Finally, he straightened. "Mild concussion. Needs rest and monitoring. Your wife's got steady hands in a crisis. She did everything right. He's lucky." After he left, I sat beside the bed again, studied his face, slack with sleep, but alive, breathing, present, here. "I'm the lucky one," I whispered. "You saw me at that depot, saw value where someone else saw insufficient merchandise. You gave me space to heal without forcing it, time to choose without demanding it. You made me coffee every morning like I mattered, like my comfort was worth effort." His hand was warm under mine, his pulse steady against my fingers. Proof of life, promise of more. He woke fully the next day, groggy but whole, caught my hand when I checked his bandage, held it, looked at me with clear eyes that saw too much. "You stayed," he said. Not a question. Of course I stayed. My voice came out tender, possessive. The voice of a wife, a real one. Where else would I be? The shock must have shown on my face. because he smiled, actually smiled, despite the pain it must have caused. "There she is," he murmured. "There's my Clara." His Clara, God help me, I wanted to be. He healed, but stubborn. Insisted on working when he should have rested. I insisted he stay put. Our first real fight unfolded in the kitchen, both of us red-faced and breathing hard. "You'll hurt yourself worse being foolish. I'm not an invalid who needs coddling. I just got you back. I won't lose you to stupid pride." The words hung in the air between us like smoke. I heard them. Heard what I'd revealed. Got you back. Back implied he was mine. Mine implied I'd claimed him. Claimed implied I'd let down every wall I'd rebuilt after Thomas died. He stared at me. I got me back. I couldn't take the words back. They were out. True. Irreversible. So I did what any terrified woman would do. I fled. Spent the rest of the day avoiding him. Buried myself in laundry, scrubbing. Any task that required no thought and kept me far from his knowing eyes. But the words echoed. Got me back. Like he was something I possessed. Something I'd lost and found again. Something I couldn't bear to lose a second time. That night, alone in my room, I started packing. Not fully just enough to convince myself I could leave if I chose. 3 dresses folded, good shoes wrapped, books stacked, creating the illusion of choice while my hands shook. I picked up Thomas's pocket watch. It still ticked reliable, steady, indifferent to my crisis. I'd kept it as a reminder. Love ends. People leave, even the good ones, even when they don't want to. The watch was supposed to make me careful. Instead, it had made me afraid. I sat on the bed, trunk half full, arguing with myself. You came for arrangement, stayed for work. This was never supposed to be real, but it is real. Has been for weeks. You can't survive losing again, but refusing to live is just another kind of death. You're scared, terrified, absolutely terrified. A soft knock. Clara. He saw the trunk, the partially packed belongings. Didn't ask if I was leaving, asked why I was afraid. I couldn't lie. Couldn't pretend this was about anything but fear. Because if I let this be real, and I lose you too, I don't think I'll survive it. He sat beside me on the bed, careful, giving me space to breathe, to choose. I'm afraid too, he said quietly. Every damn day. But Sarah's death taught me something I wish I'd learned easier. You can't refuse to live just because you might lose. That's not protection. That's just another way of dying. "What do you want?" he asked. First time anyone had asked me that question since Thomas died. Not what was practical, not what made sense. What did I want? I want to stop being afraid. I admitted. My voice broke on the words. I want to stop running from feeling alive. I claimed you as wife to protect you. He said, to give you safety when you needed it. But these months, Clara, I've wanted it true. Not the arrangement, the marriage. Real marriage built on choice and respect and, he paused, and love. If you'd let it be, love. There was the word, the terrifying word I'd been avoiding. You're not invisible to me. He continued. Never were. From that depot forward, I've seen exactly who you are. Brave, strong, kind even when kindness costs you. Worth choosing every single day. He stood, left me alone with my choice. Stay, he said from the doorway. Not because you're trapped, not because it's practical. Stay because you choose to choose me. The way I chose you, I wanted to say yes. The word was right there, but fear held it captive. I sat there till dawn, trunk open, life balanced on an edge. The pocket watch ticked in my palm Thomas's time. Stopped at 3:47 when the watchmaker had wound it for the funeral. But my time hadn't stopped. My life was still moving forward, whether I was brave enough to move with it. The question wasn't whether I'd lose again someday. Everyone lost. Loss was part of loving. The question was whether I'd let fear of loss steal what time I had. Whether I'd choose life or choose fear. Whether I'd risk pain for the chance at joy. I'd spent 2 years being careful. Being safe. Being half alive. And here was a man asking me to risk everything on the terrifying possibility of happiness. On the dangerous prospect of love. On the radical act of choosing forward instead of backward. What's worse? I asked myself. The pain of losing someone you love, or the emptiness of never loving at all. I'd lived both. One was sharp and terrible and ultimately survivable. The other was slow death by inches. I knew which I could live with. Finally knew. Dawn came with startling clarity. I looked at the watch, Thomas's time. Frozen. Then, at the window, new day. Still starting. I could honor what I'd lost without letting it determine what I'd have. Could grieve Thomas and love again. Could carry the past without letting it carry me. I stood, began unpacking. Every dress hung back in the wardrobe. Every book returned to the shelf. Thomas's watch placed on the dresser, honored, but not clutched. Remembered, but not worshipped. I wasn't erasing my past. I was making room for my future. And that future, terrifying as it was, included him. I found him in the barn, already working despite the doctor's orders. He saw me coming and straightened, waiting. His face showed hope and fear in equal measure. We were both risking, both vulnerable, both terrified. I walked right up to him, took his hand, the one that had picked up my trunk at the depot, that had poured my coffee every morning, that had reached toward me during the storm. Held it tight. I'm choosing to stay, I said clearly. Not whispered, not uncertain. Clear and certain and true. Not because I have nowhere else to go. Not because it's practical or safe or sensible. I'm staying because somewhere between that depot and this barn, you became home, and I'm choosing you. He pulled me close. His forehead rested against mine, and we stood there breathing the same air, hearts beating against each other like they'd been doing it for years. I'll probably fall off horses again. He said, make you angry, disappoint you sometimes. I laughed. Actually laughed, surprising myself with the sound. I'll probably be stubborn and scared and difficult. I'm counting on it. His voice was fierce. I don't want some perfect version of you. I want the woman who survived grief and rejection and still had courage to choose love again. I want the woman who sat on that trunk refusing to break. I want you, Clara, all of you. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a ring. Simple silver. Clearly newly made. Had the blacksmith make this 3 weeks ago? Been carrying it around, waiting for the right moment to ask. But I don't need to ask now. You already gave me your answer. He held it out. But I was the one who took it, who slid it onto my own finger. Not him claiming me claiming us, choosing this, choosing him, choosing to be brave. This is real now, I said, testing the words, feeling their weight. This was always real, he corrected gently. From the moment I saw you at that depot, refusing to cry in public, I just waited for you to know it too. This was the moment I'd been running from. Not because it was wrong, but because it was right. Because choosing him meant choosing vulnerability, choosing risk, choosing to believe that love could survive loss, that I could survive loss, that surviving and living weren't the same thing. I'd thought strength was building walls, protecting myself, staying safe behind locked doors. But real strength was this standing in a barn with my heart exposed, choosing to love anyway, choosing to be chosen, choosing forward. The first time I married, I'd been young and certain and fearless. This time I was older, uncertain, and terrified. But this time I knew what I was choosing, not just happiness, but the risk of pain. Not just love, but the possibility of loss. And I chose it anyway. That's not fearlessness. That's courage. When we kissed, it was gentle, honest, full of promise. The kiss of two people who'd learned that love wasn't about perfect timing or absence of fear. It was about choosing each other anyway. About building something real from the ruins of what had been lost. About having the courage to try again, even when trying meant risking everything. We walked back to the house hand in hand. My ring caught the morning light, simple silver. Perfect fit, tangible proof of choice. The trunk that had held my old life sat empty in my room now, ready to be filled with new memories. New beginnings. I'd been returned at the depot like faulty merchandise. Left sitting with my broken hope and shattered dreams. But that rejection had redirected me here. To this man who saw value where others saw only insufficient goods. Who recognized worth that others missed. Who chose me not, despite my grief, but with full knowledge of it. The lesson crystallized, sharp and clear my worth was never determined by who rejected me, but by who chose me. And more importantly, by learning to choose myself. To choose life. To choose risk over safety. To choose the terrifying possibility of happiness over the certain protection of fear. Thank you, I said as we reached the porch. He raised an eyebrow. For what? For picking up my trunk that day? His smile was soft, tender, full of love I was finally brave enough to accept. Clara, I'd pick up that trunk every day for the rest of my life if it meant you'd choose me at the end. I looked at him, this man who'd seen me invisible and made me visible again. Who'd waited patiently while I remembered how to be brave. Who'd given me space to heal and time to choose and freedom to run, knowing I might never come back. You won't have to, I said. I'm not running anymore. And I meant it. Every word. The seasons turned. Our first harvest together, working side by side to bring in hay that would feed the stock through winter. Our first snow, waking to the world transformed, white and quiet. Our first spring, watching the land green again with possibility. I learned that marriage the second time was different, less idealistic, more intentional. We didn't take each other for granted because we both knew how quickly everything could change. How suddenly absence could replace presence. We chose each other daily, deliberately, with full knowledge that choice was gift and privilege, not right or guarantee. The town that had witnessed my rejection at the depot gradually witnessed our partnership. Women who'd looked away that day now nodded greetings at church, asked for my recipes, included me in quilting circles. I became part of the fabric of the community, no longer the returned merchandise, but the rancher's wife who'd made something beautiful from public. Humiliation. One day at the general store, I saw him, the man who'd rejected me. Our eyes met across the aisle. He looked away first, shame coloring his face. My husband's hand found mine, squeezed gently. We kept walking. I didn't need his regret, didn't need his apology or acknowledgement. I had something better. I had a partner, an equal, someone who saw my worth from the beginning. We worked side by side in everything. When cattle prices dropped, we strategized together at the kitchen table, going over numbers and options until we found a path forward. When I wanted to expand the garden to sell vegetables in town, he built new beds without being asked, helped me plan what would grow best, what would sell well. We weren't his ranch with me helping. We were our ranch, our life, our choice made and remade every morning. I understood now what I couldn't see at that depot. That day wasn't about my inadequacy. It was about his. A man who could reject someone sight unseen, who could measure worth in youth and appearance alone, was never going to recognize true value. But the man who'd claimed me without hesitation, who'd waited patiently while I learned to trust again, who'd seen my strength when I felt broken, he had the wisdom to recognize worth others missed. The thunderstorms still came. But now I faced them standing on the porch, his arm around my shoulders, watching the lightning paint the sky. The grief for Thomas didn't disappear. I still carried him in my heart, still thought of him with tenderness and loss. But it was no longer the heaviest thing I carried. Love, I learned, makes room for history without being diminished by it. Both my marriages were real. Both my loves mattered. Human hearts are bigger than we think, capable of holding multiple truths, multiple losses, multiple loves without any of them making the others less. One afternoon, I was in town for supplies when I noticed her, a young woman sitting on the depot platform, trunk beside her, back rigid with the effort of not crying. I saw myself in every line of her body, the determined dignity, the barely contained despair, the pride that wouldn't let her collapse, even as everything collapsed around her. I approached carefully. "Miss, are you all right?" She looked up with eyes full of tears she refused to shed. "I'm fine. Thank you." "You don't look fine. You look like someone left you waiting." Her composure cracked slightly. He said I wasn't suitable. I sat beside her on that trunk. "I've been where you are." "Right here, actually. Same depot. Same story. Rejection feels like the end of the world. like proof of your insufficiency. But sometimes I paused, choosing words carefully. Sometimes it's just a redirection toward something better, someone who will see your worth. I gave her the address of the ranch, told her we needed help, and she was welcome to work while she figured out her next move. No strings, no expectations. Just one woman who'd survived offering a hand to another who was surviving. She took the address with shaking hands. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Wait until you've met the reality of ranch work. I smiled. But if you need proof that being returned can lead somewhere good, I'm living evidence. Walking back to the wagon, I thought about how far I'd come. From broken widow to invisible relative to rejected merchandise to this wife, partner, woman who'd learned her worth wasn't measured by who left, but by who stayed, by who chose, by who saw. They say home is where the heart is. I learned it differently. Home is where someone sees your heart and chooses it anyway. Where rejection's sting gives way to recognition's balm. Where being returned becomes the unlikely beginning of being found. I was supposed to be what he ordered young, compliant, grateful for rescue. Instead, I became what he chose strong, whole, his equal, and in the choosing, in the being chosen, I finally came home to myself. Some evenings I still passed the depot on supply runs. Always pause there, remembering. The woman I was sitting on her trunk, planning survival. Not knowing redemption was loading supplies 3 wagons over. She couldn't see then what I know now. The right person doesn't want what you pretend to be. They want who you actually are. Complicated, grieving, guarded, and gradually, gloriously coming back to life. I'd thought my life ended when Thomas died. Thought it ended again at that depot. But endings and beginnings look similar from certain angles. Both involve letting go. Both require courage. Both reshape everything. The difference is which direction you're facing when you take that first step. Love the second time around isn't about replacing what you lost. It's about having a heart big enough for both, for memory and present, for who you were and who you've become, for the woman who was rejected and the woman who was chosen. She's the same person. She just learned her worth wasn't measured by who left, but by who stayed. I was returned once, left at a depot with my trunk and shattered hope, public shame and private despair. But I was also claimed, chosen, and finally cherished. The difference between those things is everything. It's the difference between existing and living, between surviving and thriving, between being alone and being home. That man picked up my trunk that day, but I picked up my life. And that, in the end, has made all the difference.